And welcome back, college hockey fans, to another episode of NCAA with our NCHC crew. Max Veech, along with myself. I'm Nick Maxson with you to break everything down. My goodness, Max, it's March. It's mid-March. Feels like in a blink of an eye, we went from preseason to non-conference to here we are to where it's a best of three. And for both of our squads, both St. Cloud and Duluth, there is a path and probably a narrow path for both of our teams to make the NCAA tournament. It will be a gauntlet to get there, but it's not impossible. So we'll talk about the previous weekend's actions, plus we'll preview, obviously, the rest of the NCHC Frozen Faceoff quarterfinals, and then also catch up on some other relevant news across a great state of hockey. So, Max, welcome back to the show. Good to see you back here, my friend. I appreciate you being on, as always.
Yeah, loving being back here. You mentioned the path. We don't necessarily have the same path, although if either of our teams make it, or if both of our teams want to make it, those paths will have to converge. So I know we've played each other, we being SCSU and UMD, have played each other 4 times already this year. I would love to get a couple more games in, and that would mean both of us have to make the NCHC final at the Xcel Energy Center finale in St. Paul there. So it's a long shot, but if it can happen, that would be my preference. Even though that means kicking probably one additional team out from the NCHC out of the national tournament, so be it. If that's what it takes to get one of our 2 in, that's what it is.
That's what it is. Max, and let's just say it this way. When St. Cloud and UMD have converged in St. Paul, there have been some, shall we say, highlight reel type games, some instant classics there at the Xcel Energy Center. Mind you, again, as we've talked about it a few different times, the last ever Frozen Faceoff Championship in the Xcel Energy Center. It will transition to home sites next season. So we briefly touched on this, Max, too, about the loss of the, shall we say, the spectacle of it, but also sort of excited to see after the season what those home sites atmospheres might look like, what the crowd turnout could be. But there's still yet a championship to be crowned this year. So to get there, we have to first recap the rest of the regular season. And our 2 teams collided in no surprising terms, 2 very close games, Max. So I'll let you kind of break it down first.
Sure. Yeah. It was no less exciting than I would expect out of these 2 teams facing off against one another. I always feel like it comes down to, a 1, maybe a 2 goal game. Obviously, there's going to be a blowout here or there, but it lived up to the hype, as it always seems to. Friday night, I would say I was maybe not surprised, but pleased to see that UMD was able to score first and second, which is rare for UMD this year. They held on basically the entirety of the game for the most part until they didn't. They gave up a goal late to get it into overtime. I think there was probably
22 seconds.
Yeah, 22 seconds left in the game. And then in overtime, UMD takes another penalty, which they've been prone to do this year when they get into some, critical situations. And then they give up another goal near the end of overtime with probably 26 or something seconds left, under sub 30. I don't remember what the official number was, but not great to see that type of a loss out of UMD. You're basically giving up 2 additional points. They got 1 out of the game, which it is what it is. But that game was in hand. I mean, you talk about Brett Larson and the cojones that he had to pull the goaltender with like 4.5 minutes left. It was, roughly.
Minutes, yeah.
Yeah. And then, UMD had possession in the offensive zone with the goal, with St. Cloud's goalie pulled, and I don't remember who it was. They tried to do, a move to skate around somebody instead of just firing one from granted a sharp angle. And it didn't end up working out for them. And it was just trying to survive. And they did not, unfortunately. So ugly in that aspect, but it started out very pretty. I mean, the Max Plante to Zam Plante goal on the power play was about as good or as pretty as you would be able to set one up in college hockey, brother to brother, people that grew up in the same hometown. It doesn't matter, how you want to frame it. It's all of it in one, and, pretty play nonetheless on top of that. So very pleased to see that. I just, couldn't get over how insane it was that they ended up losing that game. And luckily for me, if you want to call it lucky or not, the NCHC TV stream, or maybe it was just my internet connection, I'm not going to blame it entirely on one or the other, started glitching out near the end of the game, so it froze right before, and I mean seconds before, the St. Cloud goal. So
NSI radio, correct?
yeah. So yeah, it was one of the things that I was just, somebody was looking out for me. They were sparing me the heartache in real time. Eventually I saw, 5 minutes later on Twitter, and I was just like, yeah, it's kind of what I expected when you take a penalty in that situation. So I just didn't have to witness it at that time. So really even game, I would say, overall. Obviously, it went to overtime. That's kind of what you would expect. Even shots on both sides. Faceoffs were relatively even. UMD had a little bit more effort and fire for the majority of the game, and then it just went into panic mode. So it is what it is, but a good game overall, and that carried into Saturday as well. It started a very similar script in terms of UMD getting off to a 1 and then a 2-goal lead. But that 2-goal lead lasted, I think, 30 seconds or something before St. Cloud ended up making it a 2-1 lead. So that didn't feel very good. It kind of felt like, it was reminiscent of the night prior, where you just can't stretch it. And in years past, UMD has had one of those 2-goal leads where it's like, all right, well, we're up 2. We've got this game in the bag already, regardless of if it's the first period or not. That's not been the case the last couple of years with UMD, whether it's the defensive effort and skill or the goaltending or whatever. Seems to be lacking a little bit. And on the front side too, I mean, there's just a lot of turnovers on the offensive side of the puck, both in the defensive zone and the neutral zone. And that's a tough spot to be. But a little bit different on Saturday. They were able to hold out, getting the 3-2 win there. So the big goals coming from Anthony Menghini.
Yep.
He was the star of the weekend, I think, from UMD's perspective. 3-goal weekend, and just kind of I don't want to say bullied St. Cloud, because it was an overtime loss and a 1-goal win. But it seems like there's always one player from UMD that finds a way to have one of those weekends against St. Cloud, or vice versa. But it's been Ben Steeves the last couple of years. Now it was Menghini this year, at least in the past, the last 2 games here. And I'm hoping anyway, that it might be Max Plante in the future, because he's starting to get rolling against the Huskies in terms of the points that he's putting up, not necessarily on the goal column, but at least on the assist side of it as well. So all that was great. The one thing that I'm not necessarily, it doesn't give me trepidation or pause or anything like that, but there's a goalie situation that's not going to be figured out soon, and there's not very much time to have it figured out. Adam Gajan was kind of switching back and forth with Clayton Knapp for UMD, and they were kind of splitting wins, and it seemed like there was a little bit of momentum for Knapp, just given his statistics being a little bit better. But Adam Gajan gets both starts this weekend, and he played great as well. I think it was a really good goalie battle on a couple of different occasions. I have to tip my hat to Isaac Posh. He kept St. Cloud in there on a number of different occasions with grade A chances, what I would consider grade A chances anyway. And some of the pucks that got by were, I think Jack Smith's was a tip that just kind of trickled in, hit the post through a very narrow corridor there. So had he been healthy all year, and I want your opinion on this now that I'm done babbling a little bit. Had he been healthy all year, I think his name would be much more in contention for that Mike Richter Award conversation. Not that he's necessarily out of it. I guess I don't know if he made that finalist list or qualified for it, given the starts that he was able to have. But I think he would be a much more serious contender had he been able to start, 30 plus games.
I still think he is a contender.
Yeah.
I will tell you that outside of the college hockey sphere, NHL scouts are noticing. I have heard and have had conversations with folks around St. Cloud, and this includes scouts that tell me that there is growing rapid interest in Isaac Posh as a college free agent. And that to me is not surprising for those who've watched him play. I've also been asked this, Max, and I'm going to give you a bit of a different take this weekend from at least from St. Cloud's perspective, is where would the Huskies be if he wasn't injured? And the problem is that when the Huskies went on their record-setting drought, it wasn't Isaac Posh. Granted, would it have helped if they'd been in the lineup? Sure. But a couple of things that I've talked about St. Cloud this year. One, the lack of goal scoring. This weekend, they came in scoring just 2.19 goals per game. That is roughly a goal shy per game on average than we've seen in recent years. So that's been a struggle. 2, goaltending, goals against, closer to 3. I'm not a mathematician, Max, but the last time I checked, that's not a great average between the two.
Correct.
The other thing is we're forgetting about injuries to Ryan Rosborough that was on that dominant fourth line of Rosborough, Ryman, and Grant Ashawn, and then also the injury to Cooper Wiley, arguably the team's best two-way defenseman. Yep. Those 3 were all out for significant portions of that stretch. So to say it's Isaac Posh is just a lazy argument, in my opinion. But I'm with you in terms of the college hockey sphere. Once we go back into that atmosphere here, I think there would be more conversation. I still think he is gaining respect amongst college hockey faithful. But like you said, because I think more so of where St. Cloud as a team's position is, I think it does sort of lessen his chances of having a more serious conversation surrounding the Richter.
Go ahead. I would just say he's very similar stat wise, I think, when I was looking at it earlier anyway, to Trey Augustine in terms of goals against and save percentage and, the qualifying stats. The difference being what you just mentioned there. Trey Augustine is on a team that's fighting for #1 overall seed and, winning the regular season in terms of college hockey opinions. And that's going to give him quite a leg up when you get into those conversations about whether or not he's deserving of a Richter, despite not having the fanciest stats in the country. So, yes, I would also agree that no, not all of those losses were on the lack of Posh being on the roster for St. Cloud, or available anyway. He was on the roster, just not available to play. But I do think that in those close games, he might be worth, another save or 2 that slip past somebody else. So do I think that you win 50% of those even? Probably not. The play in front is not that great, but I think you change the momentum and you change the atmosphere, which might then change some of the wins. I think you'd be good for another 2 or 3 wins on the season for sure over the stretch that he was gone. So there's a lot of what ifs for sure.
And of course, glitches in the matrix, right, Max? So, but to your point, I mean, he does bring that game stealing element to the game, right? Where, despite the offensive anemic nature of St. Cloud this year, sometimes that save can be just as good as a goal scored, right?
Right. Exactly.
So with that being said, Max, I'm going to give you my first person take of the weekend. One, couple of things that jot out to me right away. Both starts for St. Cloud on both nights were abhorrent. Slow, seemingly tight, almost like they were playing not to lose and not playing to win. So when we talk about the statistics, after 60 minutes, they were relatively even. After the first period and Friday night's game, wasn't even close. UMD led in shots, I think 13-3 or 13-4. Shot attempts were like double. Faceoffs were double in UMD's favor. Yes, faceoffs. UMD was winning by double in faceoffs. I did not,
which is crazy.
I know. I'm just reading the stat line here. I'm kidding. But St. Cloud woke up in the second period and then was able to claw back in. And again, you mentioned the cojones of Brett Larson. They knew what they had to do to try to push for to get out of the 8th seed. And, it's just unfortunate that it took them to all of 20 some seconds left in regulation to get Josh Zinger's tying goal. Kind of a weird broken play too. UMD overcommits on the far wall.
Yeah.
Puck comes in to Zinger. He actually went to release the puck right away. He fans on it. Gajan kind of caught in between. And then the shot placement there was perfect, right over the left pad and just underneath the glove of Adam Gajan. Hard to really blame the goaltender there when, again, you're expecting that initial chance to come to your way and then trying to either reset or hold your ground. It's a goofy play. It didn't matter, though, because as soon as overtime hit, it was locked in, right? We knew, and when I say we, the NCHC knew where both of our teams are going to head. We're going to discuss that here in a second. I think a much better effort Saturday for St. Cloud. It still was a very bad, slow start in my opinion. And again, some nerves there and maybe just feeling a little bit deflated after, again, just coming up short Friday. But at the end of the day, good to see that they had pushed back on Friday to get it back within, first of all, to then take overtime. And then on Saturday, pushing hard. They had chances. There was a couple of open nets that they missed. Gajan made some pretty good saves, including a short-handed chance against Adam Ingram. So at the end of the day, again, just another classic UMD St. Cloud matchup. Which leads us right into, Max, our frozen face-off bracket, essentially, right?
Yeah.
So let's do this. Let's work backwards with this. So let's do North Dakota Omaha first, and then the gold, essentially a gold pan rematch. So with the results of the weekend, it's Omaha that actually picks up the last home seed. So it's the Fighting Hawks, North Dakota, traveling to Baxter Arena down there in Nebraska to have this best of three series. Max, what are your thoughts on this matchup? And we'll kind of go from there.
Yeah, I'm excited to see this one. This is one of two rematches from last weekend. Omaha had to win on Saturday, so pressure was on them to win to get home ice in that Saturday game, and they put up 7 goals. So 7-3 final there. It's not something you see in the NCHC all that often, especially in a game that's this important. So I don't think we're going to see 7 goals from either team in any of the games that are in this first round of playoff hockey, especially since both of them want to win if they want to make the national tournament as well. It's probably going to be a relatively low scoring affair where there's some tight sticks, and it's going to take a while for somebody to break through. And you're going to hear me say that for every one of these series. I don't know that any one of them is going to be a blowout, and that includes Western Michigan and St. Cloud, which we'll talk about obviously in more detail as well. But it's the tone that I expect to see in the NCHC playoffs. And these two teams have played each other well all year, and I think Omaha has had the better of North Dakota in recent history anyway. I don't know if it's 7 of the last 8 coming into this weekend or what the official stat was, but they've been playing well against North Dakota, both at home and away. So to be able to play in your home arena and kind of welcome in the team that you split with the week prior is something that's going to be a lot more comfortable for Omaha. And I think they've got a chance for the quote unquote, it wouldn't be an upset because they're the higher seed, but they are lower in the pairwise. So I don't know what's the upset there technically. It's going to be an even match regardless. So I'm excited to see it. I think, Omaha's goaltending has been a little bit more consistent all year. TJ Semptemfelter is good occasionally. He is much more inconsistent. Whereas, is it Simon Blackcozy?
Blackcozy, yep.
Yes. Has been the maybe not the best or the most consistent. At times, he has been the best goalie in the NCHC. I think both goalies from Western have been more consistent on a regular basis. So however you want to split it, I think the goaltending of Omaha and the size is going to be the difference for them should they play to that and utilize it as their strength. North Dakota relies on EJ Emery, Sasha Boisvert, and a lot of their younger team to generate the offense to get their wins recently. And that's why Omaha has had the success that they've had against North Dakota. So that's your matchup there, is whether or not the rookies and younger players are able to overcome the size and goaltending of Omaha, or if Omaha just kind of plays bully ball and keeps control of the puck.
I tend to agree most of that, Max. mind you, Simon Latkozy was just named first NCHC all team essentially.
Mhm.
So,
Yep.
so I guess take that. No,
Mhm.
he's been arguably one of the better college hockey goaltenders in the country that no one's really talking about.
Yep.
And there's a problem because you mentioned Omaha's success against North Dakota. The styles that they play just doesn't match up well for North Dakota. It just does
Yeah.
not. You mentioned bully. I think one of our better friends would say they're playing downhill, right? So they're a team that,
Sure.
they come at you hard, and they finish checks. Their forecheck, when it is played to the way Gabinet wants them to play, is an incredibly tough forecheck to break,
Mhm.
because they will pummel you shift after shift after shift. They force decisions earlier, and that third high forward just is there to be the quarterback spy and there to essentially, erase either a stretch pass or two to try to step up and make a play if the puck
Mhm.
just started loose. And that is a problem for North Dakota because we know they don't love, shall we say, being pushed around. Doesn't matter
Right.
what it is. And then you mentioned Semtenfelter. He's been their biggest, I shouldn't say goaltending, as you mentioned, has been North Dakota's biggest question mark going into this season. It continues to be a question mark.
Well, they keep bringing in random goaltenders year after
Yeah.
year after year after year. They don't develop anybody and get them used to a system, and they're just they play. They don't even play the hot hand. It's just they try and find a piece that's going to fit. And not that they've all been bad, but none of them have been as good as they have been. They've not been able to replicate the same stats that they had at their previous university or program at UND, which is
No.
disappointing to the fans, I would assume.
Well, and part of it is too. I mean, let's go back to a goaltender we thought would be a bigger difference just a couple of years ago, Ludwig Pearson, right?
Yeah,
Coming from
yeah.
Miami, had won awards in the NCHC for his play, and remember that was the year that they turned over their entire defensive corps, 7 brand new defensemen, and
Yep.
arguably that has been their best season defensively up until
Correct.
this time of the year, right?
Right.
And this is where North Dakota's, shall we say, emphasis on the skill up front, right? I don't know if this is a Brad Berry or if there's more behind the scenes. That's reason why that they, shall we say, prioritize their scholarships or who they get commits from is up front. This isn't college hockey 20 years ago. And what I mean by that is there's just teams are just better defending through the middle of the ice on the rush. You're not going to be able to do Connor McDavid skate around Mark Johnson end to end, right? That's just not the case.
Right.
No, I would say that they've been better this year to a fault. And I do think there is a little bit more of a spotlight on goaltending independently because sometimes when you look at teams that play and you say, oh, the goaltending stats are not as good. But when you watch film, it's like, oh, they're just a mess in their own zone. No kidding. He couldn't stop a puck. They're in the right in front of the slot. No one's covering him, right? I don't get the sense this season that has been as common as, shall we say, we're hearing this goaltender gave up a goal they probably wish they would have had back kind of conversation, right? So, and as you and I both know, Max, in playoff type hockey, because this is playoffs are essentially both squads, right? I mean, their goal is going to be no different than ours, is they have to pretty much go out on a run to get into the NCAA tournament. It's going to be lower scoring games. Offense is going to be hard to come by. When you have Latkozy behind you, that is an all-world goaltender, and again, accolades to show. I just don't know if UND has enough breakthrough skill against what has been a very staunch Omaha defensive corps. And I do think Omaha, who has had that success against UND, does have a slight edge in this series. I just do.
I would tend to agree with that. I think just given the relationship that these two teams have had over the recent history anyway, and what you had mentioned there, the overall play style, it's certainly in Omaha's favor, even if the forward on ice talent on paper might not be. I just feel like it's going to go their way again.
I do too, which brings us back to the second rematch you mentioned, Max, from last weekend. It's Denver and Colorado College. Again, the Pioneers being the home team. This one is goofy. Now, I say because we'll put it this way. Colorado College, it's been a very weird year for them, to say it lightly. Great team, great players. They're just not as deep as I think we thought they were.
Yeah.
Mbarico isn't Superman.
Mm-hmm.
And they're going up against a team that has, shall I say, the pedigree of playing in these types of games a lot. Is got a coach that's been in these types of situations a lot. We're talking David Carl.
I was going to say maybe the best coach in college hockey. It's I don't want to say Jordan syndrome where you just kind of get so used to him being really good and highly lauded and everything that you kind of overlook him. But this guy has been looked at for, NHL jobs. I don't know that he would ever take one. I think he's at his dream job currently. And he's had so much success here and at the junior stage as well. So to say that he's not at least in the top 5 would be crazy to me. But yeah, I think you're on a rant here, not a rant. You're on a roll here with leading into a point that you want to make. And I hate to derail you, but when David Carl comes up, I need to say so many really good things because he's just proven time and time again that despite his age and whatever you want to say about it, the guy has been a superstar behind the bench.
He has. And to your point with taking a job, I do think he will eventually. I think where David Carl does not want to end up in is a situation where, shall we say, it's a Buffalo Sabres, it's an Anaheim Ducks, where there's so much work to be done on the roster build and prospects. I think he wants to come into a situation, let's put it this way, like where Boston made a change. I think he would have came into where Joe Sacco took in a place where maybe there needs to be a retool, but there's still you already have like maybe your foundational pieces there. I think that's a situation where he's really looking to enter the NHL at. Granted, those types of situations don't present themselves often in the off-season areas.
Right.
So, and to your point, I just don't know if he has gotten an offer, or 2 has gotten an offer from a franchise he wants to go coach for. And I kind of really think that's what it's down to. I know he plays the semantics game a little bit where he says, I'm looking for my best offer. What he really means by that is situation. Just because I think he wants to carry on that winning pedigree that he's established. And I just don't think he wants to end up in a spin cycle of, shall we say, like the likes of Anaheim as well as Buffalo, just to name a couple of NHL teams who have had 15 plus rebuilding years.
He doesn't want to be the Nick Saban of college hockey where you are an absolute failure at the professional level.
Exactly. But where we were going with this, Max, is when you have a coach with World Junior National Championship pedigree, these are the games that show why they are who they are, right? So not to say that Colorado College can't do it, because I think they could. It's going to be a tall task. And again, this is going to sound like it's on a repeat, but I think CC is going to have to find a way to be patient. I think if there's one thing Denver does so well, maybe better than any other team in college hockey, is understanding patience within the game. Let's go back to last season in the quarterfinal in the NCAA, or should I say the regional semifinals, probably the better way to phrase it. Had to come back and win in overtime and another overtime game just to get to the Frozen Four. And they didn't look panicked. I mean, I know that they didn't look their best, but they didn't look like they were reaching or going out of their structure. That's the type of coaching and, shall we say, the attitude that teams that go on those runs need to have. That's what you're going to get with Denver. You just kind of hope that Colorado College is the equal goalie in the shootout, right? Whereas the shooter comes in, the goalie's on the other side. In the playoffs, as you know, Max, it's who blinks first. And usually, unfortunately, Denver makes their opponent blink first. That's a tough matchup. But I could see CC making a run if the cards fall the right way. It does start in net with Caden and Mbarico.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's 1A and 1B from Caden and Mbarico, both on the Denver side trying to beat him and the Colorado College side trying to utilize him. So David Carl's, maybe it might not even be his philosophy, but it certainly seems like it is. He doesn't demand perfection, but he demands you be poised with the puck on the ice. It's one of those things where it's like you have to know systematically what should be happening and be in charge of that. It doesn't always have to go to perfection. You're going to get weird bounces. You're going to have to adjust, whatever, but knowing how to recover, his team is more well prepared than just about anybody in the country, in my opinion. And so it's kind of an uphill battle. I think everybody kind of knows that. No, Denver did not win the NCHC like almost everybody predicted. No, they did not continue the superstar start that they had, going 12-0. They've had a couple of hiccups. David Carl was gone. Zeev Buium was gone. A couple of people were, missing, both for World Juniors and from injuries and whatever else was going on throughout the year. But they've still amassed an incredible resume. And when we're talking about the all NCHC team, first, second, and third team, Denver has more players on it than any other team, and they were third in the standings to finish the season. Yep. I think they've got 6 players on there versus 3 and 4 for your Western Michigan and ASU teams, respectively. So you start talking about the talent that they've got, and obviously Zeev Buium's at the top of the list there. And then you start thinking about Jack Devine, and he's incredible. Eric Polkamp coming in as a transfer has, more than lived up to the expectation that he was kind of given as a hired gun, if you will. And then you've got Matt Davis in net, who again doesn't have to have stellar numbers when you have that team in front of him, but he's been solid enough and has that winning pedigree that you were just talking about. So to overcome that for CC, who relies on 1 or 2 offensive pieces, and Caden Mbarico on the back end there, it's a lot to ask. I'm not saying it can't be done. I'm not saying it hasn't been done. But Denver has certainly gotten the better of them this year in the matchups that they've had. And I expect that to go and be the case in the playoffs as well.
I do too. I think that's just Denver, again, just is poised. They just played their best when it's a winner take all situation. Granted, again, it's a best of 3, but Denver just, again, this is where we see them really shine in terms of how they play. So I agree with that. I think Denver moves on, as do I think, since we didn't technically make a prediction, I do think Omaha does take down North Dakota to get to St. Paul one last time, which, Max, leads us to our teams. And I'm going to start with 7-2, which is Duluth going to Tempe. Right now, I'm going to get your opinion on something, because I've seen this float around. There was a press conference with Greg Powers claiming that he's one of the best 5-on-5 teams in the league. I want your response to that.
My initial response is fear, because UMD is certainly not one of the best teams and not something that I would dare go up against. With that being said, despite UMD's struggles, they have played ASU incredibly in 5-on-5 hockey throughout the duration of their matchups this year. I would say that it's 3 overtime games out of 4 they've matched up with them this year. It's crazy to say that you have the better squad guaranteed. And that, I know he wasn't specifically referring to him versus UMD. He was saying him versus the rest of college hockey. I don't have stats in front of me to say whether or not that's true. But if it were true, I would say that he would certainly have more than 1 or 2 high-scoring guys near the top of the list in the national standings, and he wouldn't have to rely on his power play being one of the best in the nation as well. So I'm not saying they're a bad unit 5-on-5 by any means, but I think it might be a little bit more weighted towards their offense, might be a little bit more weighted towards the power play than he's willing to admit.
I don't disagree with that, Maxer. I will say this, though. I find it a little funny because I was scrolling through the interwebs this afternoon, and there was even some St. Cloud fans that were taking, shall we say, a seat of, Greg Powers, like, oh, you're going to claim you're the best 5-on-5 team in the conference. And I actually don't necessarily disagree, not statistically speaking.
Sure.
I will say this, after watching them play, now granted, I still think Western Michigan is better, but outside of the Broncos, I can't make an argument for anybody else but Arizona State. And here's why I say that. That team is fast. They get north out of their zone about as efficiently as I've seen anybody in the conference this year. And mind you, as you know, I spent a good fair amount of time at a certain rink this season watching every single team, including the Redhawks. So they are an incredibly efficient team that way, which means, and with a very veteran lineup, their forecheck is relentless. They cycle well. They perform a high cycle. Their defenders are very active getting pucks through. They do get them through that first layer to make sure that they get a chance at the net. And their other forwards are getting into the interior of the house and trying to cause chaos, get rebounds, cause screens. So they do, from the eye test, to me, passes the second best in the conference. I can't take out Western Michigan for that. But I think the bigger point he was trying to say is, you know what? Let's be honest, right? It's playoff time. You got to be confident in your team. And I think we've talked about this at times, whereas there was a lot of questions as to how Arizona State would establish themselves in their first year of the NCHC. And granted, I think now looking back at their transfer additions and you kind of what sort of makeup they would want, it was very intentional and it worked out pretty darn well in their favor. The problem will be next year, but that's a discussion for later because a lot of seniors, a lot of graduates in their forward units that are not going to be able to return. So this is sort of a playing their flag as I'm here, NCHC, and I think they're going to be a formidable opponent. Now, to UMD's counter, right? Goaltending. I do think you have the edge in goaltending. Now, per Scott Sandeling, because I had a chance to talk to him this weekend, his biggest fear, not only this weekend, but I would imagine going into this weekend, as we saw breaking out down the weekend, is the inconsistencies in every aspect of the game, right? So, I was
waiting to see which one you said because I was going to point out the other ones too. So I'm glad you said every aspect,
and that includes goaltending. I would even argue that Gajan, that nothing to take away from Cooper Wiley in overtime, but Gajan went down a little early in that overtime power play. And again, he's a great goaltender. I'm not saying he's bad, but it's those subtle little details that really get magnified in games like these. Here's something else that's kind of interesting that I noticed. UMD also gets up the ice really, really efficient, right? The Shaga Bay line is a treat to watch. Holy buckets do they create. Max, I have watched UMD hockey for a long time. I have never seen a line move the puck as much east-west as that line does.
They love to do it.
They love to do it.
Especially if they can get somebody down behind the net. That's kind of where they thrive, in that Gretzky position where you run that offense. And I think everybody wants to run it from down there. But those three specifically, and I think of Shagabe out of those, which is kind of crazy to me a little bit, more than anybody that likes being down there because he's just so pass-oriented and trying to make those good setup plays to either Max or Zam or whoever's on a line with if they're out there on a weird change. But that's where he wants to be, and that's how they want to play, is in that east-west transition space and try and get goalies off of their mark.
Yes, and also Dominic James, Anthony Menghini, also the speed, and also some grit to a Dominic James. So there is a lot of similarities between these squads in terms of how they want to play. The power plays, special team wise, are both teams' forte. If there is something to be concerned about, if you're a Bulldogs fan, to me, it's the penalty kill.
100%. And they did well this weekend, not taking any majors, but they cannot afford another single major the rest of the way, regardless of if that's 2 games or if that's going to be 8 games. Like they can't take another one because that's just been an absolute killer for them. They can rest their hats or, set it on the hook saying that, yes, we were able to kill a couple of those off. That should not be any point of pride. I think you saying that you had to kill them off is insane. ASU at one point had the number 1 power play unit in the country. They've got, I think, still 3 right now at 29, just over 29, which is a great clip if you're a coach. That's a target that very few hit in the college hockey level. So to give them any power plays or any leash is going to be tough in its own right. To give them a major penalty and 5 minutes of attacking time is going to be something that I don't think many people, specifically UMD, would be able to overcome. So discipline is going to be the name of the game for UMD. And you were mentioning it in terms of how you would beat a team like ASU. They absolutely do have one of the most quickest forechecks and most 100% effort going one direction. It's going to be punch and counter punch, and just to see who's able to manage that the best. And UMD hasn't been, the pinnacle of being able to capitalize on those opportunities this year. Not saying they haven't done it. Obviously, I think one of the goals from Menghini this year, or this past weekend, came from Dominic James on a fast break situation like that, where he was able
in the game too.
Yeah, exactly. Where that's where you're going to have to score on, and that's going to be the opportunities that you're given against a team like ASU. So if they can replicate what they did last weekend on some of those fast break opportunities, that's what I expect that game to be. A lot of that going back and forth, maybe not as much sustained pressure from one team or the other, but quite a few really, really good opportunities in both directions.
I'm actually going to go against you on that, Max.
Really?
Yes. Now, because I just don't think if you're UMD, you want to turn it into a track meet. I don't.
You don't want to, but that's how I see it going.
Sure. Which I think where we would agree on is that it's the neutral zone, right? Can you slow them down? Meaning, can you force them? Because here's the thing: Arizona State flies both wingers. That's what they do. They clear out space, and then their D are right hot on their tail. They get to the red, and if they don't see an opportunity to carry it, they're firing it in, and it's in full speed. They time their entry in the zone very, very well. The key for me for Duluth is how can you disrupt the initial puck carrier or the second touch in the defensive zone for ASU. That to me is the key. And that's a tall ask really for any squad.
It is.
I think that's how you have to play them. St. Cloud, I remember that series very vividly when St. Cloud, even though they lost both games, they had leads in both of them too. And part of the reason they had leads was the physical play on the forecheck, and really shutting down time and space for the defenders, the wingers on the breakout, because it really it put them in quicksand. So that's an area that you can expose. The thing that I just don't see is UMD isn't the most physical squad, at least from what I saw this weekend. So that might make it more difficult to, shall we say, impose a forecheck like that. But you do have to do it in a different way. But you do have to clog up lanes. You do have to kind of, like you said, you still have to play downhill, but maybe not finish a check, right? And then I think the danger factor is since UMD likes to counter like the transition play, is to make sure that the risk assessment, which is a split-second decision in terms of, hey, do we have control of the puck? Now I can go, isn't read incorrectly, and then all of a sudden you're going the opposite way where the puck is going. So it's going to be interesting. Do I think UMD can do it? I do. I just worry about a 3-game series where a veteran, heavier ASU squad, to me, on paper, could, shall we say, impose a wear down type series against UMD. That's my only concern there. Do you have anything other, Max?
No, I don't necessarily have much else. The one thing that ASU does or wants to do often, and it's something that UMD has struggled with all year, is get some of those wingers lost in space and on that back door. And if UMD is able to correct some of the errors that they've had, the U of M series, the UND series, both of those come to mind as ones where they lost guys continuously on that backside and left Gajan out to dry, specifically as the goaltender in mind, is not something that they can afford to do here. And they've done a significantly better job in the second half of the year in picking up those players, but they don't have the luxury of space or time to revert and fall back into those bad habits again. So a little bit more stout defense and smart play in terms of keeping up with your guys is going to be needed from UMD to make this a winnable series for them.
Can't disagree there. And then now we got to go to, shall we say, the ultimate series. The Zoo, the Lawson Lunatics. It's the best team in the NCHC all year. They won their first ever Penrose for regular season champs. St. Cloud's got to travel to one of the best teams in college hockey, one, but also one of the more shall we say crazy environments. Also college hockey. Max, let's just put it this way: this is not a great draw if you're St. Cloud or really any team in Western Michigan, right?
Yep.
But it isn't impossible. But it is also kind of simple in that sense, right?
Right.
We talked about St. Cloud's proficiencies and also deficiencies. They're well known. It's going to really come down to Isaac Posh. It's going to come down to limiting mistakes in the defensive zone. I will tell you this, Max. I've never witnessed in a season where a team makes one or two mistakes, and essentially every single time those mistakes are made, they get scored on.
Yeah.
It's been that kind of year. Now, it might look boring, but St. Cloud has to play a game management series from the first of the puck to the last. I just don't think they can play as loose or free as they'd like to, because just how good and dangerous Western is. I mean, you give Western and Michigan an inch, they don't just take a mile, they take the distance between here and the moon, right? They just don't let you get away with anything. So I think really for St. Cloud, it's going to be more about, I don't want to say survival, and not sitting back, because you don't want to do that either, but playing a hard-nosed forechecking game, but also understanding that you have to be above pucks at all time is really what it comes down to.
Yeah, I would say that, a casual fan might say that Isaac Posh has to win St. Cloud this series. Yes, goaltenders and stopping shots is one way to limit the amount of times that a team scores. The better way to limit the amount of time a team scores, not give them the puck. Like you mentioned, it's going to have to be a game management style of play, and it's not one that St. Cloud as a program is unfamiliar with. It might be one that Austin Bernovic or some of the other younger players on the team aren't necessarily as familiar with or as excited about playing. Colin Ralph comes to mind as well, where it's like, guys, you're just going to have to eat it for a little bit or wait for your opportunity in the offensive zone. I know that you want to get shots off, but these goaltenders are not ones where they're going to give up a good rebound for you. You're going to have to just find a way to get into those spots with the puck on your stick. It's the lanes just aren't there. The defense that they play is great. And to get too many guys down low, you're leaving it too open on the back end for Alex Bump or any one of the Western guys to go at 100 miles an hour and put the puck in your net. So it's a tall task. I think both Hampton Slukinski and Cameron Rowe made second and third team all NCHC, which is crazy to have two goaltenders from the same program get those honors. But they both deserved it as well. I think it's not crazy when you look at the stats. So it's a tall task. Again, it's the NCHC. Anything can really happen when you get into the playoffs there. Yes, it's a 3-game series. I think if St. Cloud wants to win this one, they're going to have to do it in 2 because they're going to have to surprise Western. That sounds stupid and chaotic listening to it out loud, but I'd still believe it. I think that you can't give them any momentum whatsoever, and you just have to kind of own control of that puck, and that's going to start at the face-off circle, and that's not necessarily the strength of every center from St. Cloud, but they're going to have to find a way to make it their strength in order to gain that possession, in order to maintain it. So it's a couple of critical step process, and you can't falter in any one of them if you're St. Cloud, because the margin for error is so small against a team like Western with how they've been playing all year.
So true. And to your point, Max, the patience level, we talked about how Denver's patience. I mean, really, to be St. Cloud has to be even more patient in this series. And again, this is not equating to sit back. This is not equating to not be on your toes on the forecheck. It's more of, we talk about risk assessment, right? And this is actually a David Carl quote. I remember talking to some of the Denver players after the Frozen Four win on the ice, and talked about how, again, they did not win by big margins. They were small margins. Yep. So essentially what I heard from a lot of the players was understanding that it's about the team benefit on a play, meaning more so if it's a 50-50 puck, we have to treat it as, okay, if it's 50-50, if I start striding, I know I'm not going to win it. I got to peel back, right? If it's something where I start striding. I know I have a chance at that puck. I got to go, and I got to go hard on it and at least disrupt something there. So that way it's either buying us time to make a change or to essentially allow other guys to sort of come back to the play. Right. So that is what we're describing there. It's tough to really, shall we say, paint a picture of what that actually looks like verbally. But that's sort of what St. Cloud has got to do. Because at the end of the day, like you said, Western is just too dangerous in transition. They're too dangerous when they get in the zone. And one bad read, one risk calculation is usually Western makes you pay for it. And with St. Cloud's lack of scoring prowess, they're just not built to come back in games. Again, under 2.5 goals per game all season. So I just think that playing that boring style and more so understanding that if you're in that situation and it's getting to the third, it's tie 1-1 or hell 0-0, right? You can't, you have to resist breaking the mold. And I think that's actually the toughest part, right? It is. Just because, and Max, I want to get your thoughts on this, is because championship teams, that's really what happens. Let's go back to Minnesota State a couple of years ago when they could have won the national championship. They played essentially a very similar style that Denver does, right? It was a defensive shutdown team. And then things opened up a little bit. And what happened, right? They sort of, for whatever reason, their identity just got lost in that third period, and that cost them a championship. So, not that it cost you a championship here, but it might cost you your season nonetheless. And that really is the biggest fight, which is to a player how to fight your own urges to try to do something, make an impact, when the reality is less is more, right?
Absolutely. And I would say that it's not going to be easy for the younger guys to stay in that structure. I think it's one of the ones that you just try and instill every time that players come off the ice. You have to reward the good things that they did and try and really tighten up and make them aware of things that aren't going to plan. Because if you don't, you can't trust that those younger guys are going to remember it for the entirety of the game. Because it's just so easy to get lost when you're talking about a fast-paced game like that can get out of control. And if Western scores first, Alex Bump first team all NCHC one of the only 2 unanimous decisions on that. If he gets hot and scores 1 or even 2, I don't think that you have the ability or flexibility to change that philosophy of how you need to play. You still are going to have to chase in addition to that. But if you start giving up some space, you're just opening yourself up for that to get worse, in my opinion. So it's going to be a matter of discipline, both from coaches saying it over and over again and players being willing to retain and absorb it on the bench throughout the game as well. So that's kind of how I see that one. I don't know that I would give them a very high probability of coming out of it, just because, Western and everything, the machine that they've created is not necessarily unstoppable, but intimidating nonetheless. But it's something that I see continuing, at least in the near future.
Yeah, I can't disagree with that, Max. So I think what we'll do here is we'll just do a quick little picks of who comes out of this round. Max, we'll start with you. Who goes on to St. Paul to be the Final Four that heads to St. Paul?
I think you and I both agree on Omaha and Denver. I'll let you say whether or not you've changed your mind in the last 10 minutes here, or however long it's been about those 2 programs. I want to say that Arizona State is in a position where they're currently on the bubble. They need wins in order to make the tournament as an at-large bid. I'm looking at the numbers right now, and they have it doesn't have a number for an at-large bid, but they're 51% in and out right now, and that would be an automatic qualifier. So they're giving them a 50% chance for being an automatic qualifier, which is kind of crazy because they're in the 16 spot right now. So I'm just going to call them a bubble team. So are they going to be gripping their sticks a little bit tighter, knowing that they have to win at least these 2 games in order to give themselves a continued chance at making the tournament? I hope so. I'm going to go and say that UMD does win that series. And that has nothing to do with the experience. Granted, Dom James has some, and Gallatin has some, and there's other players that know how to win at this time of the year. But I just don't know that Arizona State knows how to go on a run in the NCHC at this point either. And this is contradictory to what I said probably in the last 2 weeks here. I've been running back a lot of hot takes from the beginning of the year, and now I'm just doubling down on those. So me flip-flopping on the fence is something that many people will take joy and pride in and throw in my face probably, Monday next week. But I have faith that UMD is able to at least play very well in this series, and they've got as good a chance as anyone to advance. And unfortunately, I think Western kind of dominates in probably 2 games. You know what? I think Western takes 3 games in order to lock that one up in Kalamazoo. I think there's a little bit of fight left in St. Cloud. They're not ready to give up yet.
So a couple things. We both are on with Omaha and with Denver.
Yep.
I have to call your homerism out.
Yeah, I know you do. I know you do.
I do. I do think it's going to be closer than people think. I do think ultimately, though, Arizona State does take that series. I do think they do it in 2, because it's not a matter of skill to me. The inconsistencies throughout the UMD lineup is
totally
really
fair.
Is going to be, shall I say, the rotten egg that spoils the batch. And with St. Cloud, I want to believe that they can surprise somebody.
Yeah.
But my hockey brain, which is a non-lying, shall we say, biased brain, says that's probably a bit too much to ask. Yeah. I do think Western Michigan does take that series. Could it go 3? Sure. My gut, though, tells me it might be in 2. Now, because ultimately it's got to be a defensive showdown for St. Cloud if they're going to do it, which is not an easy task. And again, we give Alex Bump and Cameron Rowe and Hampton Slukinski some credit. They've also got a very good young freshman defenseman too that also was the 3rd team All NCHC this year. And I'm trying to remember his name. Give me 1 second here. It's Juna Väisänen. Who was very, very good 2-way defender there for Western Michigan. There just really isn't a weakness for Western Michigan, right? There just isn't.
Right.
So that doesn't mean that it can happen. Ask Colorado College and Western Michigan just 2 years ago. But this is a different squad. This is a different Husky team. And I just feel Western is just put together to make a very serious run. I would even go as far, hot take, Max, that they may make their first ever Frozen Four. I really do believe that. They have a very solid chance at that. Now, depending on what the bracketologists do, because that's always subject to opinions, we'll put it that way.
Yeah.
But those are my picks either way.
I would say, should Western Michigan make the championship game or win the NCHC tournament here, the Frozen Face-Off, they have a chance to supplant Minnesota as the last number 1 seed in a regional in the NCAA tournament here, because Minnesota's off for the 3 weeks basically after losing last weekend to Notre Dame, and Western is just 1 spot below them. Yeah,
you brought that up.
it's something that they've got. They want that number 1 seed going into the regional tournament there. They don't want to have to feel like an underdog in any one of those games. And frankly, I don't think they deserve to feel like an underdog in any one of those games.
No.
So there might be a little bit more at stake here for Western than people are saying. Yes, they're guaranteed to be a tournament team regardless of how they finish here. But, going a little bit further in the playoffs here is going to give them a little bit more ammo when it comes to maybe supplanting a Minnesota or Maine or whoever is going to be in that 4 slot for the last number 1 seed in the national tournament.
And I want to final thoughts with this because, oh my.
Yeah.
Granted, the folks, shall we say, Drew Cove, to our other sister podcast here, and MNCAA, with Nate Wells, I can only imagine the morning they did this past week of recording. But
Yeah.
Max, I want to ask the question very simply. What the hell happened? I mean, I have my thoughts, but I want to get yours first.
Yeah, it's easy to say goaltending right off the bat, given how the Friday game went into what were essentially freebie goals given to Notre Dame, and maybe kind of stifling any sort of vibes or momentum that Minnesota had going into the series. But that doesn't necessarily change anything that would have happened in that third game there. And yes, there was injuries to was it Hughlin?
Aaron Hughlin, yeah, broken
Yeah.
leg. Jeez, out for the season.
And
So
that's devastating as well, but I don't know that Minnesota felt confident at the point that that happened either. So there's a lot going on there. It's something that kind of stresses me out for the NCHC moving forward, because we are losing the NCHC Frozen Face-Off at XL Energy Center, like we've talked about, at length, both today and in the past. And we're going to, the higher seeded sites, which is the format that the Big Ten takes. And that might be the biggest problem with the Big Ten tournament is the higher seeds. If you know that you're making it to the national tournament and you lose early in the, your conference playoffs here, you're sitting there and you're not getting that competition or high level skate that all these other teams are getting for another couple of weeks. And that's been really tough when it comes to the results in the national tournament as well. I don't know that there's been more than one or two teams that have made it out of that first round after sitting for that long. So it's a tough uphill climb for Minnesota, and having to do it without a key piece, I would say, on the defense there, and some goalie turmoil in terms of who's going to be starting and if they're going to be able to overcome the bad luck that they've had. There's a lot going into it for what should be a favorite in that first round matchup. Yeah, it's something that I've been thinking about, and I don't know that it's going to be as big of an issue. Maybe the NCHC goes to a couple of teams are going to the number one site. They could revisit that before we get into that next year, but we'll have to wait and see.
yeah, I'm with you on that there, Max. Goaltending certainly is, shall we say, the easy, the casual fan's eye, right?
Yeah.
I just also, I mean, I go back to the 2022 Frozen Face-Off, right? Or the Frozen Four, Logan Cooley, or was that 23? Jeez, I can't keep it straight anymore. It might
It's
have been
2025 now. 2 years ago. Are you talking about again?
in Tampa. So the
Yeah.
national championship game against Quinnipiac.
Yes.
Yeah, that would have been 2 years ago. I just don't know what the Gophers' plan is. And I say that in terms of I see similarities to that game and what I saw this weekend, which is you essentially handcuff your greatest assets in your scoring. Now, granted, we can talk about the goaltending aspect all we want. It is what it is. It's been, to me, something that, I think even we discussed in the early onset of the season, which is if there was a potential drawback to this roster, it was in net. And it's these types of games where that gets really exaggerated. With that being said, the team didn't look engaged to me.
Yeah, there was something missing, and I don't know what that is. I'm not saying that it falls on Bob's shoulders at all, let alone alone. But there was some fire that wasn't there on both the offense and defensive sides. They weren't winning puck battles. There was guys getting open. There, like I said, there were bad bounces, and maybe that's what it was. It was just kind of a gut punch when those type of things happened. But it was just it felt like they were scrambling and not necessarily thoughtful in their actions on the ice there. And that's not what we've seen out of Minnesota for the majority of the year. But I mean, we've seen it at this time come playoff time. And it sounds like, I'm a Minnesota hater coming from a UMD fan, and that's going to be easy to point out. But I will also say I would love to see as many Minnesota teams make it as far as they can into the postseason as possible. And that makes me, maybe a more unique UMD fan. I know that there's quite a few that will root for the demise of the Gophers no matter who they're playing, and that's certainly not where I land. I think what's good for any Minnesota team is good for all Minnesota teams.
With you there.
but it's something that's I struggle to see. And the mindset that they're going to have overcoming the Hughlin injury and a really tough weekend in what should have been a couple of relatively easy wins versus what was certainly the worst team in the Big Ten all year, is something they're going to have to figure out. I was going to say quickly, but they've got time to look at it for a little while here. So I have no doubt that Bob will do his best and get these high caliber players more excited for a playoff game, which should be easy to do. I just don't know if it's going to be enough, and it'll all depend on who that matchup is.
It will, and unfortunately, too much time to sit and stew over it, right? Sometimes these long breaks, it's more about the mental side of, shall we say, overcoming a loss like that than it is the body. We'll put it that way, right? So, Max, we'll do this. We're going to leave it right there because we've already surpassed 60 minutes. Thank you to everybody again who watches us on YouTube and listens to us on your favorite podcasting platform. This is Max Veech along with myself, Nick Maxson. This has been NCHC on MNCAA.